She mocked a disabled man, refused to apologize, and brushed off critics until Kash Patel quietly exposed everything she didn't want the public to see. It wasn't the first time a politician made a careless comment, but this one hit differently. The clip was short, just under 20 seconds. Jasmine Crockett stood in front of a mic at a human rights campaign fundraiser in Fort Worth, Texas. Her tone was sharp and she was mid-rant about Governor Greg Abbott's stance on LGBTQ rights. "Governor Hot Wheels," she said with a smirk, "wants to roll over everyone's freedom." The crowd gave a nervous chuckle. A few people clapped, but by the time the clip hit Twitter that night, the laughter had turned into national outrage. Crockett, a first-term Democratic representative from Texas, had made waves before with her fiery speeches and aggressive one-liners, but this mocking a man in a wheelchair crossed a line. The internet exploded. Hashtags trended. News anchors raised eyebrows. Within hours, journalists were on the phone with advocacy groups, political strategists, and even Abbott's office, and it didn't take long for the backlash to turn bipartisan. On The View, usually friendly territory for Crockett, co-host Anna Navarro frowned at the screen as they played the footage. "I don't care who you're talking about," she said. "Mocking a disability is never okay." In Dallas, a conservative veteran named Bruce Halterman, who lost both legs in Iraq, posted a video from his wheelchair calling out Crockett by name. "We can disagree on policy," he said, "but when you go after a person's body, you're not attacking their ideas, you're just being cruel." His video was raw, emotional, and it went viral. Over 3 million views in a day. Still, Crockett didn't apologize, at least not right away. Instead, in a follow-up interview with a local radio host, she doubled down. "I'm not making fun of anyone's wheelchair," she said. "I'm talking about how he bulldozes every freedom we have left in the state. Y'all are too sensitive." Those 4 words, "y'all are too sensitive," would be replayed endlessly over the next 72 hours. But while the public was caught up in the noise, a very different kind of response was brewing behind the scenes. In a small studio in Fairfax, Virginia, Kash Patel sat quietly watching Crockett's clips. He wasn't fuming, he wasn't tweeting, he was listening. An old-school operator with a legal background and experience in high-level intelligence roles, Patel had developed a reputation for being strategic, surgical. Even when it came to holding people to account, he'd been paying attention to Crockett for a while. To him, the Hot Wheels comment wasn't just offensive, it was part of a larger pattern. Rash words, zero accountability, escalating rhetoric that turned serious issues into performance art. He took a deep breath, grabbed his notebook, and started writing. But while Kash Patel was preparing his case, the public firestorm was only getting hotter. It had been 4 days since the Hot Wheels clip. The story refused to die. Every morning show in the country replayed the same footage. Crockett's words, her smirk, her refusal to walk anything back. And now a new quote had surfaced, this time from a recent podcast appearance where she casually joked, "Sometimes I feel like Ted Cruz just needs to be knocked over the head, like hard, real hard." The timing couldn't have been worse. Just 2 weeks earlier, she'd stirred controversy by calling for Elon Musk to be taken down after he criticized a bill she co-sponsored. Her defender said it was a figure of speech. Her critics, including Kash Patel, saw it differently. The noise was growing louder, but inside Crockett's D.C. office, it was getting quieter. Staffers spoke in hushed voices, phones rang non-stop, donors were asking questions. 1-8, a 30-something speechwriter named Leon Haskins sat in a corner trying to clean up the latest mess. He looked over at his colleague Mia Granger, who handled press relations. She was pale, exhausted. "She doesn't get it," Mia said, shaking her head. "She thinks it's just culture war noise again." Leon nodded slowly. "This one's different." It hit a nerve. Back in Texas, Democratic colleagues were being asked where they stood. Most dodged the question. A few gave carefully worded statements about focusing on policy, not personal attacks, but no one rushed to her defense, not this time. Meanwhile, Patel was crafting something bigger than a tweet storm. He stayed off social media, working through the night with a whiteboard full of notes. His small team gathered facts, timelines, and archived interviews. They found old clips, panel discussions, and Reddit threads where Crockett had made similarly aggressive remarks, one in particular an offhand insult during a school board hearing, where she'd snapped at a parent and accused them of being on the payroll of hate, was especially damning. Patel wasn't rushing. He knew how this worked. In a world obsessed with speed, patience was his power move. While the media tore through headlines, he was building a case brick by brick. But on Friday night, everything changed. Crockett appeared on a late-night panel show hosted by comedian Tyrell Jennings. The audience was friendly, the energy was loose, but halfway through the segment, Tyrell turned serious. "Real talk, Congresswoman," he said, "do you regret calling the governor Hot Wheels? Some folks in the disabled community didn't take that well." Crockett smiled. "If they knew what he was doing to people in this state, they'd call him worse." There was a long pause. Tyrell blinked. The audience murmured. He leaned back in his chair. "That's your answer?" Crockett didn't flinch. "I don't sugarcoat." The silence was loud and the clip was everywhere. The next morning, that moment, her final refusal to show any empathy tipped the scales. Voters started talking. Not just about what she said, but how she said it. Cold, proud, detached, not a misstep but a pattern. But while public support quietly thinned, Kash Patel was about to pull the pin on something that would blow the conversation wide open. The video wasn't flashy. There was no dramatic intro music, no quick cuts or fire emojis, just Kash Patel seated in a plain chair, a legal pad on the table in front of him, and a sharp, calm look in his eyes. "Let's talk about Representative Jasmine Crockett," he said, voice steady. Because this isn't just about one offensive comment, it's about a pattern, and I think the American people deserve to see the full picture. That video titled Kash Patel Enough is Enough dropped at noon on a quiet Tuesday. Within 3 hours it had 400,000 views. By nightfall it had crossed 2.1 million. Patel didn't yell, he didn't mock, instead he spoke like someone laying out evidence in a courtroom. Clip by clip he walked viewers through a series of incidents, each one more alarming than the last. First the Hot Wheels comment. Then the Ted Cruz line, the Elon Musk rant. A moment during a college panel where Crockett accused a student of representing fascism because he asked about budget transparency. Patel didn't cut the footage, he let it play, then he paused. Does that sound like a public servant, he asked, or does that sound like someone intoxicated by attention? He didn't just critique, he explained slowly, clearly. He talked about tone, responsibility, and the difference between passion and recklessness. Then he flipped to the bigger picture. You can't govern if you're constantly dividing. You can't protect people's rights if you're obsessed with taking down anyone who disagrees with you. That's not public service, that's ego. People listened not because of who Patel was, but because of how he said it. He wasn't trying to go viral, he was trying to be heard. In one part of the video he addressed the veterans community directly. You know what courage looks like, you've seen it up close. I think you'd agree mocking a man's wheelchair because you don't like his policies isn't courage, it's cowardice hiding behind a microphone. That line hit hard. Veteran groups started sharing the video. Even some liberals who had previously dismissed Patel started tweeting he's not wrong. In a quiet diner in Amarillo, a retired teacher named Marla Stone watched the video on her phone. She'd voted for Crockett, donated to her campaign even, but now she sat staring at the screen with a knot in her stomach. I didn't sign up for this, she whispered. I thought she was sharp, I didn't think she was mean. At the end of the 19-minute video, Patel didn't call for her resignation, he didn't say her name with venom, he just looked into the camera and said, we need better from all sides, we need leaders, not performers. It was that final line, simple, unpolished, that stuck with people. By the next morning several news outlets picked up Patel's video. Headlines read, Kash Patel holds mirror to Crockett's record and it's damning, no attacks, just receipts. Patel's takedown gets applause across aisles. Even more telling, a few Democrats began quietly calling reporters to say off the record, we've had concerns for a while, but Crockett wasn't backing down, and her refusal to pivot was about to cost her more than just headlines. By Thursday the walls were starting to crack. In a closed-door meeting inside the Capitol, a group of Democratic strategists sat around a long oak table. Phones buzzed, laptops were open. A few members scrolled silently through Patel's video, shaking their heads. No one said much at first, then one of them, Gloria Mencken, a veteran consultant with more campaigns under her belt than she could count, finally broke the silence. We've got a problem, she said, and it's not just the comment, it's her pride. She won't let this go. Everyone in the room knew what she meant. Crockett had refused every opportunity to clarify, soften, or even slightly apologize. She was still tweeting, still defending herself, still retweeting memes mocking Abbott, doubling down as if this were some kind of game. And to make matters worse, Patel's video wasn't fading. It was picking up steam. Morning shows, primetime podcasts, it was everywhere. People weren't just reacting, they were quoting it. Patel's quiet delivery made it even more powerful. He didn't scream, he didn't insult, he let Crockett's own words do the damage. That's what scared her allies the most. It was hard to spin back. In Texas, Crockett's campaign manager Lane Corbin was trying to hold things together, but donors were calling. One longtime contributor from Plano had already pulled out, saying the wheelchair thing wasn't something he could defend. At Sunday lunch, Lane sat across from Crockett in her campaign office, stress written all over his face. We need to address this head on, not just throw shade back at Patel. He didn't make this about him. Crockett was unfazed. He's trying to erase me with facts and fake concern. I'm not giving him that win. Lane exhaled. It's not about him anymore, it's about how you're coming across. People aren't mad just because you said it, they're mad because you don't care that you said it. Silence. Crockett turned to her computer. Then let them be mad. That moment, that defiance, would end up costing her even more. Over the next 2 days, cracks turned into fractures. A local Texas newspaper ran a front-page editorial titled The Arrogance of Power, Why Crockett's Words Matter. A centrist Democratic senator, when asked about the controversy, gave a carefully worded answer about choosing words wisely in leadership. Not exactly a defense. Then came a clip from a town hall in Lubbock. A woman in her 60s stood up and asked a blunt question. If she can say something that cruel and not even blink, what else is she willing to ignore? The room went quiet. People were starting to reevaluate not just Crockett's words but her character. Meanwhile, Patel wasn't celebrating. He'd said his piece. He went back to his usual work, only acknowledging the reaction. When asked by a reporter, it's not about a viral moment, it's about accountability. That's all in that sentence, he said, more than some politicians do. In a full press conference, he didn't poke at Crockett. He didn't spike the football. That's what made it land harder. But inside Crockett's circle, things were unraveling, and the real pressure hadn't even hit yet. The air inside Crockett's D.C. headquarters felt different now. The buzz of confidence that once filled the space had flattened into silence. A few staffers were working, but the energy was off. Nobody was laughing. Nobody was looking her in the eye. Behind the frosted glass of the conference room, Jasmine sat with her inner circle, 5 people, all of whom had been with her from day one. Lane Corbin, the campaign manager, Mia from Press Leon, the speechwriter, a junior aide named Roxy, and Gerald Spence, a longtime political strategist who'd flown in that morning from Austin. The mood was thick. Gerald cleared his throat and went straight, and we need to be honest, this isn't going away, and if you keep pushing the same tone it might be your seat on the line next year. Crockett leaned back in her chair. So you're telling me to apologize for telling the truth? Gerald's brow furrowed. No, I'm saying there's a difference between speaking truth and torching the room while you do it. Roxy, young and loyal, tried to chime in, but people love her for being bold. They did, Mia said flatly. Now they're just tired. Even the folks who like the fire are wondering if it's just fire and nothing else. The room went quiet. Leon slid a folder across the table. This is the coverage from just the last 36 hours. Patel's video is now at 4 million views, and he hasn't said a word since. That silence is strategic. Crockett opened the folder. Article headlines stared back at her like little warning signs. Jasmine Crockett's joke isn't funny anymore. Patel's case is surgical and she's bleeding. Support from fighter to flammable. What happened to Jasmine Crockett? She closed the folder. I'm not grumbling to that man. No one's asking you to grumble, Lane said carefully, but maybe a real statement from the heart, not a tweet, not a joke, just some honesty. Crockett looked around the room. You all think I've gone too far? Nobody answered right away. Then Mia spoke up. I think you forgot that words don't always make you powerful. Sometimes they just make you noisy. The sting in her voice landed like a slap. Crockett didn't respond. She stared out the window at the street below. People walked by, umbrellas open against the drizzle, carrying coffee, holding briefcases, probably not thinking about her at all. That bothered her more than the headlines outside the room. Staffers glanced up as the door opened. Crockett walked out without a word and disappeared into her office, door clicking shut behind her. Inside, Gerald sighed. If she doesn't shift course soon, she's handing Patel the legacy while she's still in office. Leon looked up from his laptop. She still doesn't understand. It's not the joke, it's the pride. But pride wasn't Crockett's only problem. Her next public appearance would make things even worse. The auditorium at Southern Methodist University in Dallas was nearly full. It wasn't a rally, but it was supposed to be a moderated town hall, part of a statewide listening tour. But with everything brewing online, the media had shown up in force. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists sat with notebooks open. Everyone waited to see if Jasmine Crockett would finally address the growing backlash. She walked on stage wearing navy blue and a tightly set expression. Her team had gone back and forth on how she should handle the event. Lane suggested a short, direct statement at the top. Mia had drafted something neutral, grounded in responsibility, but Jasmine scrapped it all. She wanted to speak off script. The moderator, a local news anchor named Ronita Bell, opened with a few softball questions. Crockett answered crisply, maybe even a little too sharp, but as they approached the 15-minute mark, Ronita shifted in her seat. There's something we can't avoid talking about, she said gently. The comments made last week about Governor Abbott, the public reaction, the Patel video. I think everyone here, regardless of where they stand, wants to hear from you directly. Do you regret using that phrase? Crockett inhaled. She glanced out at the crowd. Phones were up, eyes were fixed on her. I regret, she said slowly, that people are more outraged by words than they are by policies. That room lives. There was a long pause. She went on, let me be clear, I don't care what chair Greg Abbott uses. I care about the bills he signs, the harm he causes. If that offends people, maybe they're not offended enough by what he's actually doing. A few people clapped, scattered, hesitant, but the silence in the room was heavier. Ronita leaned forward. So just to clarify, that's not an apology. I don't apologize for calling out oppression. Crockett replied, even if I do it in a way that makes people uncomfortable. That was the clip, the one that would go viral, not because it was fiery, but because it felt out of step, the wrong tone, the wrong moment. Backstage, Lane rubbed his temples. She just handed Patel another headline, and she had by the next morning. The clip was everywhere, but something had changed. Even some of her usual supporters, progressive outlets, social justice influencers, started using words like arrogant, reckless, self-absorbed. One activist tweeted, I believe in boldness, but this ain't bold, it's blind. Kash Patel meanwhile said nothing. No response. Video, no tweets. He stayed silent, and somehow that silence made his case louder. The restraint made him look composed, while Crockett looked like she was spinning in one powerful segment on a morning talk show out of Tucson. A round table of Black and Latino veterans discussed the controversy. One of them, a retired Navy officer named Daryl Whitlock, said it plainly, you don't get to lead people if you can't lead yourself. Another added, you can be right about an issue and still dead wrong in how you treat people. By that weekend, the question wasn't whether Crockett had stumbled, it was whether she could recover it all. But before she could even think about redemption, someone else stepped forward, and what they revealed would take the scandal into new territory. Sunday morning brought another unexpected twist. Out of all the people to step forward, no one expected it to be Elijah Brennan, a former campaign staffer who had worked with Crockett during her early run for state office. He wasn't a political rival, he wasn't a pundit, just a quiet, behind-the-scenes kind of guy who usually avoided the spotlight. But something in him cracked after watching her town hall performance. He posted a 6-minute video on his personal Facebook page. No production, no makeup, just him sitting in his backyard in San Antonio, speaking from the heart. I used to believe in Jasmine, he began. I thought she was the kind of person who spoke truth when others stayed quiet, but somewhere along the line, It stopped being about the truth and started being about her. He paused, glancing off camera. When she made that joke about Abbott, I winced, but when she refused to listen to anyone about why it was wrong, when she dismissed people who were hurt, I knew something had changed. She lost the ability to reflect, to be humble, to grow. The video spread like wildfire, not because it was explosive, but because it was real. One viewer commented, "This man just said what we've all been thinking," with no hate, just disappointment. Even Crockett's allies were shaken. Some stopped answering calls. A few began issuing public statements that sounded more like distancing than support. Meanwhile, Kash Patel remained quiet. His video still hovered near 6 million views, but he refused interviews. When asked by a reporter outside an event in Clearwater, Florida, if he had anything to add, he simply said, "People see the truth now. I don't need to say more." That kind of discipline stuck with folks, and it got people thinking. This whole saga wasn't about one comment. It was about what we do when we're called out. Do we dig and lash out, or do we pause, reflect, and try to understand the harm we may have caused, even if we didn't mean to? In Crockett's case, the refusal to do that became the story, and in Patel's case, the way he responded, clear, calm, focused, reminded people that accountability doesn't always come with yelling. By the end of the week, Crockett's approval numbers dropped by 10 points in her district. Talk of a primary challenger began circulating. Even her national profile, once fueled by sharp takedowns and viral clips, had dimmed, not because she got silenced, but because she silenced herself with pride. A voter named Denise Garrow from Waco said it best in a local op-ed: "Jasmine could have owned her words. Instead, she let them own her." There's a lesson in all this, one worth repeating. It's not about being perfect. Politicians are human. People say dumb things, they mess up, but what separates a leader from a loudmouth isn't just policy, it's humility. It's being able to say, "Yeah, I got that one wrong." And when someone like Kash Patel steps forward with facts, not fury, it reminds the rest of us that truth doesn't need a megaphone, it just needs clarity. So the next time you see someone in power shrug off harm with arrogance, ask yourself, do they want to lead or just be seen? Because how a person handles criticism speaks louder than any speech, and that's what this whole story comes down to. Words matter, but character matters more. If you found this story compelling, thought-provoking, or worth sharing, make sure to subscribe. These are the conversations we need to have, not just about politics, but about who we choose to represent us. The microphone is powerful. Let's make sure the right people are holding it.